Hashy square low.
It would be nice if I took myself off mute. I should well, I should spoil it.
Hello, hello. So we are with a very special guest today, Dr. Annette Harrell. Thank you for joining us today. So, Hashy Square Low. Are you familiar at all with the Tut language, which has revived lately on TikTok?
No, I haven't. I am not.
Okay, they're saying it's a language, a coded language that the came up during slavery as a way to talk around the oppressors without being detected. People are starting to learn about it, but there's not a lot of information out there, of course, because it was just something that you weren't allowed to do, or else you'd get a
Mhm.
beating. So it's a history they say is lost, like a lot of our history, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't follow TikTok that much. I'm always researching on working to preserve documents, and I have so little time, really. But thank you for informing me of that.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
what you
probably a
do is
good thing,
a
not to be on
major,
TikTok.
yeah. All right. So before we get started, today we'll see what's been happening in the news this week. You ready to do that, Yamoya?
Let's do it. All right. Ashe, to Dirk Tolliston. Um, let's go with this headline. Oakland home of slain education advocate Dirk Tolliston may have been targeted. The home of prominent Oakland education equality advocate Dirk Tolliston may have been targeted in the Friday night break-in that resulted in him being shot to death and his wife Amina, who is wounded. She was treated at a local hospital for a gunshot wound and released, Oakland police said. It does appear to be a targeted incident, said Oakland police spokeswoman Kim Armstead, adding that she could not testify whether the target was the East Oakland townhouse in the Maxwell Park neighborhood or a person. The shooting was reported at 11:29 p.m. Friday at the couple's home in the 2600 block of Monticello Avenue, which is a primarily residential area. Authorities said both victims were asleep when at least one person broke into the home. Tolitson, 52, was awakened by the noise and was shot after confronting the suspect, who also shot his wife. Authorities said no arrests have been made as of Sunday at 3:45 p.m., Armstead said. May rest in power. May rest in peace.
Ashe. White House asks Congress for billions in emergency funds for Afghan resettlement. The White House is seeking billions in emergency funds this month from Congress to help settle tens of thousands of Afghan immigrants into the U.S. In spending requests Tuesday outlining urgent needs, President Joe Biden administration asked Congress to authorize $6.4 billion for Afghan resettlement efforts 1 week after the U.S. ended its military effort in Afghanistan. The U.S. is currently working to resettle Afghan allies evacuated from the war-torn country. White House officials also requested at least $10 billion for recovery efforts from Hurricane Ida and an additional $14 billion for other recent natural disasters, including Hurricane Laura and Delta from last year. Solanda Young, acting director of the Office of Management and Budget, made the budget request Tuesday, less than 4 weeks before the current 2021 fiscal year ends September 30th. Together, the requests total more than $30 billion.
Skateboarding vandal defaces new George Floyd statue in New York City's Union Square. Newly released surveillance footage shows suspect vandalizing a brand new statue of George Floyd in Manhattan's Union Square. It's the second time a statue of Floyd has been vandalized in the city in a matter of months. The video shows the suspect riding past on a skateboard and splashing blue paint across the statue. It happened just after 10 a.m. Sunday, just 4 days after the statue was unveiled at the park last week.
Shameful.
Yep.
Tesla ordered to pay $137 million to Black former workers subjected to racist workplace. Tesla owes Owen Diaz $137 million after a jury found that the Black former worker was subjected to racial abuse that the electric company insufficiently addressed during his tenure. Diaz, an elevator operator at the company's Fremont factory for 9 months from 2015 to 2016, had been called racial epithets by coworkers, was told to go back to Africa, and saw racist graffiti in the bathrooms. The trial lasted a little over a week, and the jury found that Tesla had not taken reasonable steps to prevent racial harassment. It shines a light on what's going on inside Tesla's factory, Diaz told the Wall Street Journal. Elon Musk, you've been put on notice. Clean that factory up. Tesla has not said whether it plans to appeal the verdict. The company is facing another similar lawsuit in California state court where the plaintiffs are seeking class certification. There, Marcus Vaughn and others allege that Tesla created a hostile workplace for Black workers.
Alabama to use $400 million in COVID-19 relief funds for $1.3 billion prison construction program. Alabama officials have approved a plan to fund $1.3 billion in prison construction and renovations using COVID-19 relief money from the American Rescue Plan, among other resources or other sources. The state plans to build a pair of 4,000-bed, quote, mega prisons, end quote, for men to be located in Elmore and Escambia counties, plus a 1,000-bed prison for women in Elmore County, and to renovate several existing state prisons. The funding bills for the program state that contracts for the design and construction of the two prisons for men may be awarded to any person that was part of a team qualified for the Alabama Department of Corrections under a June 2019 request for qualifications, with responses that were due by August 2nd, 2019, or the state may issue a request for design build proposals. State lawmakers who backed the plan say the new prisons are necessary because current facilities are in, quote, critical need, end quote, of renovation. Last December, the U.S. Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against Alabama, alleging prison conditions were so unsafe they were unconstitutional. The DOJ said at the time that an investigation uncovered prisoner-on-prisoner violence and sexual abuse, excessive force from prison staff, and unsafe and unsanitary conditions in Alabama prisons.
Pandora Papers, a simple guide to the Pandora Papers leak. What do we mean by offshore? The Pandora Papers reveal complex networks of companies that are set up across borders, often resulting in hidden ownership of money and assets. For example, someone may have a property in the UK, but own it via a chain of companies based in other countries offshore. The destinations are often called tax havens or secrecy jurisdictions. There is no definitive list of tax havens, but the most well-known destinations include British overseas territories such as Cayman Islands and the British Virgin Islands, as well as countries such as Switzerland and Singapore. How much money is hidden offshores? It's impossible to say for sure, but estimates have ranged from 5.6 trillion to 32 trillion, according to ICJ. The International Monetary Fund has said that the use of tax havens costs governments worldwide up to 600 billion in lost taxes each year.
All right, doing way too many things here. All right, you want to go back
I'll
to the
take
other
this one.
Okay.
McConnell, this is a McConnell opinion. Biden wants to give the IRS the okay to snoop on your bank account. Don't let him. President Biden likes to claim his 3.5 trillion tax and spending spree will only hurt the wealthiest Americans, leaving everyone else unscathed. As his plan comes into sharper focus, though, it's becoming increasingly clear that Democrats intend to radically transform the lives of every worker, small business owner, and family in America. The latest gambit is a plot to give the IRS sweeping new authority to snoop on Americans' personal finances, providing federal agents with data on every transaction over $600. This unprecedented expansion of government surveillance should leave everyone alarmed and outraged. Currently, the government has a special authority to demand information on bank transfers in excess of $10,000. Theoretically, this allows them to sniff out things like money laundering, terrorism, and tax fraud. But President Biden's new plan creates a massive new dragnet that would sweep up all kinds of ordinary transactions that normal law abiding Americans make routinely. So they're hiding trillions offshore, but they want to know about the little $600 in your bank account.
Yep. IATSE members vote to authorize nationwide film and TV production strike. The members of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees have voted to approve a strike authorization, giving the union president the power to shut down film and TV production across the country. The vote passed with 98.7% support and 90% turnout, a resounding outcome that the union hopes will strengthen its bargaining position. Talks have stalled between the union and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which represents the studios. The unions have been negotiating since May on a new contract, and are seeking to address long-standing concerns, including long hours on set, streaming wage scales and residuals, and the stability of the pension and health funds.
Okay, and that's in the news. All right, so the reason we are here today with our special guest, Dr. Antoinette Harrell, um, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Harrell?
Yes, I guess I can start off with I'm a mother, grandmother. Certainly, I'm a genealogist and a local historian with a lot of emphasis on preserving the history of African American people in St. Helena and Tangipahoa Parish, the Florida parishes of the Southeast Florida parishes of Louisiana. So I've spent the last 10 years of my life just trying to document the undocumented people in this area.
How did you get into that work?
Well, through my mother always kept the oral history of the family on both sides of the family. And I don't care how many times a day I would call my mom and talk with her, she always found a way to go back to family history. And at first I thought, in a sense, that it was sort of aggravating, but I think this light went off in my head and said, you know what? She's trying to tell you something. She is trying to give you something, and you better write it down. You better start recording because one day it may disappear. And I'm so happy. I'm so grateful that I did. And I started researching my family history in 1994.
You are so lucky that your mother preserved that history. In this reparations talk that we do, it's like a lot of our parents, we're Gen X generation, so our parents would have been the boomer generation. They just didn't want to talk about, slavery and the things that were happening. And I think a lot of family history was just lost because people wanted to move on. And my family migrated to California from Louisiana. So, yeah, fellow Louisianan. That's why I'm so happy to have you on the show.
What part
Um,
of Louisiana? May I ask?
Shreveport,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Monroe, Shreveport, Monroe, and Delhi. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
Delhi is just a little slip of a town.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
very
Yeah.
precious.
I'm very familiar with those areas.
But yeah, so we lost a lot of connection to our family in Louisiana just from migrating out here. So I want to talk to you a little bit later about some of the heirs property out in Louisiana. We do have some heirs property, and a tract was handed down at the beginning of the year. And as you know, how Louisiana law works, when it splits, it goes to all the family members underneath, and there are like 80 family members attached to that piece of land. And it's like, these are 80 family members that I never even knew of. So I think the land really connects you to your family. So being that we lost that connection is really tragic.
And it's happening to more people every day. Matter of fact, it's right here in my own family. And that's because every generation, the generation prior to us, did not do what they should have done to protect the generation behind them. And whenever you own anything and a person passed away, you have to dispose of that property according to the laws of that state. And so often we don't do that.
Right. And then, I'm also interested in knowing, what kinds of policies they have out there in Louisiana to help people kind of secure their inheritance and their land. But in the research that I've been doing, it doesn't look like there's much. And in fact, it looks like the exact opposite, in them doing little things to take the land bit by bit over each new generation.
And I think I want to correct that in a way because I feel that we often give it back. I'm looking at my own family, and I've been trying to settle this matter for about 25 years now. And for each person that passed away, that's one more succession that needs to be open, you know. And so I think we may be up to about 40 successions for a tract of land. And the more people pass away, that's the more heirs become involved. And so I did talk with a attorney about it, and he says just so many heirs, Antoinette. It's just so many heirs. So maybe it's a conversation that we can hold off air.
Okay, all
All
right,
right.
definitely.
Mhm.
We'll offline on that. Okay. Did you have any questions you want to jump in, Yamoya?
Um, not really. I mean, we can not anything in particular right now. If we wanted to go into the conversation, we can definitely do that. But actually, I do have one question. Dr. Rell, can you tell us a little something about yourself? I know that you talked about genealogy and so forth, but something that maybe people don't know about you, like, I don't know, you could play the ukulele or something, or or maybe not, I don't know. But yeah, something that people don't know
Yeah,
about you.
I am a gardener. I love to garden. That's one of my favorite things to do. I love cooking and I love traveling. So that may be something that people who may not know me, the way that I release some of these things, that toxic things, is through working through my garden. So when I'm not in my office, I like to garden.
Yeah, gardening's a good thing. So would you consider that you have a green thumb?
Yes, I am the granddaughter of farmers.
All
And
right.
so I can't help but be, and I'm proud. I am very proud to be the granddaughter of farmers because I can always feed myself and know what I'm eating. That's very important.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. And I think we're probably ready to get into some questions here if we can start getting into them. I guess, well, one of the questions we had was what led you to the field of genealogy. So it looks like that was previously answered. Is there anything you
Mhm.
want to elaborate on that
No,
or
no,
no?
that's how I got started through my mom, and my mother died last year. So prior to that, 10 years before she passed away, she had a stroke. And so all those names and places were sort of cloudy and fuzzy. And so she really wasn't able to give me concrete information. So I am so happy that that light that went off in my head that day said, you better not even complain. You better start taking notes because there is no one else in the family. And I have a very large family. And I can count on one hand the people that talk about family history in our family.
Okay.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I was going to ask you that.
Sometimes it's very painful. There can be some very painful things that people want to be far removed from. And some people family in the past is just not that important. They are living in the present, and so there is a dishonor to those that came before them. There's a lesson to learn from the past. It's the past that shapes the present, and the present that shapes the future. So if you dishonor your ancestors, your children will surely dishonor you when the time comes. So if you don't make your ancestors a subject in the household in one way or the other, well, when your time come, it's going to be the same. And you'll find that at one time before we was colonized through slavery, families talked about the ancestors all the time and every other ethnic group of people. So we are so far removed from what it used to be. And this new way, I'm happy to say I'll be 61 this month, but I don't like what I see. So I'm doing my earthly duties here because I don't like what I see. I don't like to see the youngsters not paying attention and learning from the elders, or the elders who are trying to pretend that they are young and looking like fools at the same time, not passing down nothing but foolishness. I didn't come from a generation of foolish people. And I remember the elders, we held them in high stature. We knew who was the child and who was the adults. We don't see that now.
You think some of the or part of the problem in terms of people who descend from U.S. chattel slavery, that it's either an embarrassment that some people don't talk about it, or it's so tragic and horrific that some people just don't even want to mention it in their family.
I don't even think it's an embarrassment. I think sometimes it's so tragic, and I think the lack of knowledge because it hasn't been passed down, so they don't know what to talk about. If it was passed down to them, believe me, they would talk about it. I passed it down to my children, to my grandchildren, and I can hold a conversation, and my grandkids can hold a conversation with me. You would think it's an adult talking to me because I have planted that seed intentionally. So I think that the lack of knowledge is one reason that it's not being passed down. But they are searching. There are a lot of young people who want to know now, but there's no one around that can tell them because everybody that could have answered some questions. And then some things can be so painful in the family that you just want to forget it.
Do you think
Slavery.
that it's also conditioning from the oppressors? I mean, you hear in the welfare era taking the father out of the home, and then there's mass incarceration taking black men away in droves.
It's
Is it a
oppression.
societal problem?
Yeah, it's a lot of oppression and a lot of depression too. I see both of them. And I think that the family structure has been damaged a lot. And we have to go back and reclaim those things that did work for us, and those things that didn't work, we just do away with that. But we have to start that round table conversation in the household, because we're losing. Um, I want to know the good. I want to know the bad. Because if I know the good, that's one thing. But if I know the bad, I know what to stay away from. I know how to heal from both. You have to learn, and that has to be a healing process because there's incest, there's rapes, there is all kinds of things in the family that has separated the family throughout the years, and people just don't want to talk about it. So sometimes they change their last name, they spell it a different way and say, I don't know those people. And when people migrate, they just didn't migrate for a better life. Sometimes it was something else that they was leaving behind.
Okay. Well, we actually have a comment or a question, which was actually going to be one of the questions we were going to ask, but let's just get into it. Sherelle says, how does one go about finding your family ancestry?
I would advise them to talk to the oldest person in the family. Decide what side you want to research, whether that be your mother's side or your father's side. And I would suggest that you ask questions, be quiet, and let them answer those questions. Unlike when I first started, you had to write everything down. Now you can record those things, and if it's something they do not want to talk about, have enough respect not to pry into that. They may come back to it later. Once you collect all the information you can, such as the names of your family members, those great aunts, grandmothers, aunts, uncles, then you can start to go to Ancestry or FamilySearch.org. The reason I suggest FamilySearch.org because it's free. And there are billions of free records there on Family Search. And you start with the census. You start from 1940 and work your way back to 1870. Prior to 1870, we was not listed by name. We was listed by age. If your family was enslaved, by gender and age. But take good notes. If you're going to take notes, take very good notes. But get to that oldest aunt and ask if they have any family funeral programs that may be able to help you to learn something about your family as well.
Now, I believe it was the Mormons. I don't know if that's correct. I heard that the Mormons have quite an extensive library in history.
That
Is
is
that something you're
true.
familiar with? Okay.
That's very true. That's what the Family Search is, the Mormons. So if you go to FamilySearch.org, that is the Mormons. They have went around the United States scanning documents in courthouses, uh, creating databases, and they have a very large database. They have more than Ancestry.
Do you know
So,
why the Mormons were so interested in collecting all that data?
Because they somewhat believe in the institution of family, the earthly family going over to the heavenly family. And so that was one reason why. But I am so grateful that they did because we need those documents. Those documents are very important to us for many reasons. I do believe that part of the definition of being repaired with reparation is to be repaired wholly, and that is everything that has been damaged. And the first thing that I can think about is the damage that has been done to families. When a mother had to witness her husband or her mother, her father, or family members being sold, never to be seen again. Never to be seen again. This is 2021. I am still looking for family members in 2021 because my family on my mother's side and my father's side was held as slaves.
Now you're lucky that you had your mother, and condolences on losing
Thank
her
you.
last year.
yeah,
Um,
Ashe.
yeah,
Mhm.
but what about people who are starting from scratch, or people who are, because this reparations conversation, it has, energized people wanting to find out their family, wanting to find their roots, wanting to find out where they came from. What about people who are adopted and don't know their family? I mean, have you dealt with
Yes,
any of them, helping them search their
yes.
roots?
A lot of adoptees are now taking the DNA testing, and they are finding on through their results that they are first cousins to a person or a sister to a person, and they are reaching out to those people that is helping them to to answer those questions about their mother or their father. So it is available now through DNA, and DNA has been very helpful to me.
I think that's
Okay.
it. Oh, go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I was just going to say, so you say the DNA is as important as the actual paper trail and finding your family's history.
All of it, all of it, all of it. There is no, all of it is very important. And I do believe that for those that would like to take the DNA, I think it should be part of the reparation case that people of African descent who want to know we should not have to pay, whether it is to take the African ancestry DNA to find out where in Africa our ancestors came from, those that should be part of the reparations discussions, to look at the fact that genealogy play a major part. There's a relationship between genealogy and reparation to repair. And what's the one thing that we want to repair? It's family. Why is that? Let me give you an example. I live in a very small town right now, and I've been collecting oral history for a while now. And I always go to the elders. And this one man told me that his second great grandfather was a stud on a plantation. And he said that he know that it was passed down through oral history that he was the father of over 50 children in one place. He never laid eyes on these children. They live in a small community, so the children meet each other, not even knowing that they're sisters and brothers. They mate, and then you have a problem. And sometimes women who was used just to make babies, never to hold on to the babies after a certain point, never to see them again. So we start looking at the family and we see things in a gene that just doesn't add up. Like sometimes they would say a person's a slow learner, a certain things that goes on, you know, because we haven't looked at the genetics, because no one know. You know, there used to be a time when, especially in the rural areas, if you went to date someone, you bought that, you want to introduce a person to family, the first thing would say, who is his family? And you would have to tell them. And then the mother, the grandmother, whoever would say, no, you can't date them. Why? Because that's your cousin. So that's a lot of that in small communities. Small communities.
So you said, as far as a reparations package, DNA should be included in that. I think DNA should be included in that, and searching on these paid sites. The subscriptions should be free as well. And I've even heard that Ancestry's price has gone up considerably, or gone up a bit, since this whole reparations discussion has been happening. Trying to capitalize on the fact that people are looking for their family members. What other ways do you
Family
think
search,
the family could be
family,
prepared?
familysearch.org. That's the
Family
freedom
search, but what
dot
other
org.
ways besides DNA and genealogy, paying for that? How else could the family be repaired at this point?
Economics, because when you ride into communities and you see impoverished communities and you see, I've seen a lot just in my travels of people living in conditions that you would think would be in some third world country without infrastructures. And I've seen houses um, 5 years ago without houses. People who didn't get their freedom until in the 60s, 1960s. So I think economic development is one of those things, and certainly fundings to help the medical crisis that is in our community, and the mental crisis that is in our community too, because it's really large. It's a big crisis, and so I think that when we discuss reparations, we need to talk about those many factors that is needed in our communities. We are the victims of poverty that was passed down from our ancestors.
Okay.
Okay.
It's like another comment said the Freedman ancestry is free. Is
Hmm.
it the Freedmen's Bureau
Yes,
or
the Freemans Bureau.
okay?
Yes, but it's still connected to familysearch.org or Ancestry, one of the two.
Have you had a chance to look up the Freedmen's documents?
Oh yes, yes. I mean, I found my family when my family was emancipated in 1863. I found where they went back on a plantation as tenant farmers in 1866, and I found them in the Freeman Bureau. And so they had to sign a contract. I don't believe that children as young as 5 and 9 years old made their eggs, because They had never held a pencil. If you can make an X, you can make an A, you can make a B. I just believe the X was forged. So I did find my family in the Freeman Bureau records, which was very helpful to us.
Okay. When did you do your Freedmen's record search?
Oh, when I first started back in
Okay, so
'94.
you've done that. Have you ever tried to get into do you do genealogy as an actual career?
I take very few cases. I have 3 cases because it's not something you can do within 4 months. You know, you have to research, you have to turn over every stone, you have to analyze records, you have to put that tree together carefully. And so you're going by information that other people are giving you, which may be limited information. And so when you see this information, you just can't take it for granted. That's their family. You don't ever want to give somebody a wrong tree. So most of my I spend the majority of my time in my profession preserving documents, bringing the documents out of people's homes, in the attics, in different places, and making them available for research, creating finding aids, choosing repositories for these records, especially when it comes down to people of African descent, because there's so little records for us most of the time. I
So,
just picked up a box of records today, and it probably take me a month to 2 months
wow.
to create the finding aid and then choose the place. Well, I know they will be going to Southeastern University, but it takes a while to do it.
All right. So, if somebody wanted to get into genealogy as a career or a study, what would you recommend?
I would recommend, because now, if you really want to talk about uh, making a living at it, there is courses now that you can take. But I'm a very um, stubborn kind of person when it comes down to uh, I I have a problem with giving my money to people to tell me that I have to be a professional genealogist after they have separated my family. Okay. Now you want to tell me that I have to be certified. Okay. That I have a problem with that. Okay. That's just me, so I'm not trying to participate in large conferences. That's not what I set out to do, because it's very competitive. um, I'm not competitive in that area, because I'm doing what I would call the underground work. And so the underground work is finding the material for genealogists, for people who want to research. But I would say, if you're going to do it, you want to take it serious, well, find one of those universities, or that you can become certified if you want to go all the way with it.
Yeah.
Would being involved in the library or being a librarian, would that have any validity to that or no?
Yeah, most librarians, especially genealogists, they may have a degree in history. It may not be genealogy, but in the library, you're going to learn basic genealogy, and as long as you have the the websites that you can go to look for basic things like the census documents, World War II records, marriage records, debt records. I mean, you really can't go wrong with that, and that's just about what the library can offer you. But when it gets to be extensive, you have to start looking at universities, you have to start looking at the state archives, cemeteries, many different places you have to go. So it's not all in one place at all. So there is some, um, and the reason I'm saying that it's important with reparations, because, for instance, Kim, you are not in the South. So if you really wanted to learn about your family, you would have to travel to Louisiana at one point in your research. I mean, there's so many things that you can do online, but it is still limited. You must actually get up and go to the courthouse. So that means you would have to fly, find a hotel, and pay for your copies. And I would always tell people, certify that copy. Don't walk out that courthouse without the seal saying that it's an authentic record.
Mm. Okay.
It's,
So even with more and more stuff becoming available online, you still find that the courts don't make that information available online?
if you're going to go to court with a record, it has to be a true record. It
Mm,
cannot be a copy of something you got offline.
I
You
see.
have you want to get that seal. That seal is what makes it authentic. It makes it a true copy of from the courthouse, or from the
Okay.
state archives. I would say to anyone, if you're talking about building a case for reparations, that should be something that you should want to consider.
Okay, so there's a question from some of the comments that said, "What types of records are considered important?" I think you somewhat answered that, or
Well,
no?
let me say this. Let's say, for instance, if you are going to go to a courthouse and you want to look at marriage records, and you found a marriage record of your ancestors to say that they was legally married, you would want to get that record to be an authentic record. Let's say if you was doing research on your ancestors who was enslaved, and you know the last slave owner, and you found his records in his succession or probate records or will. Well, if you see your ancestor as one of those people, part of that record, you want to make sure that you get that seal, that authentic seal on that record, saying that it's a true record. Because let's say, for instance, if the courthouse was to burn down and those things has happened, well, that record will still be recognized as a true copy from that courthouse. So it's not just birth records, because the birth records will not be found unless you go to the vital records office. And so when you're buying a birth record, you're not just going to get a copy, you're going to pay for the original copy. Now, once that person has been deceased for 50 years, it leaves the vital records office and go to the state archives, the local state archives, whether that be Louisiana, Texas, wherever that person lived and died. So if that person died in Louisiana in 1960, let's say 1950, that record would be at the Louisiana State Archives. Well, it's 50 cents to make that copy yourself. But if you really want that to be a true copy from the state archives, whatever fees they charge, I will suggest pay that fee, whether that be $3, $5 to get the seal on it.
Okay, get the seal on it. That should, that should be something that's help funded for people who, don't have the money to do that. And in terms of reparations, like what are the criteria out here in California? We have a reparations task force going on, and one of the criteria that an economist, Dr. Sandy Darity, is being able to track one ancestor back to an enslaved ancestor. What are some ways you can track your lineage back to enslaved ancestors?
Let's use my last name, my surname. That's my slave giving name, Harrell. Um, my family always kept that name Harrell. So what I started to do after I had as much information from the oral history and the census that I was researching, going back from 1940 to 1870, I started to look for the white families in the area that had that last name Harrell. And there's when you are researching your family history, and you know that your family was enslaved, you must research that slaveholder's family. And so most of us still carry that name. Now there are times when people do change their name, and it does make it complicated. So it's that's where the oral history is so important. Let me give you an example. One man, they picked up a new name, and I'm going to use the name Brown as an example. And there was an elderly person said before they was Browns, they was Womacs. They changed their name. And so that's why it's very important to talk to the elderly people. But we're getting so far removed from the elders Many of them are dying off, and we're not collecting that information. We're not collecting that information. Now, when we take the DNA, for those of us that was on plantations and your great grandmother was raped by the slaveholder, and you will see these white people showing up on your DNA, where it's time to start looking at how is this coming in? You know, how how am I connected to them? Why is it they showing up on my tree? And it's time for you to start looking at their trees and learning something about them to see where you're, how are we connected. Well, ancestry will say your fourth cousin's removed, your third cousin removed. It will tell you something. But I would say collect as much as you can, not just from your own family. Go to that community where your family live, and seek around and ask the people in the community, who's the oldest person in the community. That's where I go.
Yeah, I mean, out here, gosh, we really don't have tight knit communities. Yeah, we're kind of all
Yep.
over the place.
That's the
Sure.
advantage of the small communities, is still tight knit. But we're moving away. But there's still elders. And believe it or not, the nursing home, now since COVID, it has shut me down somewhat. I can't visit the nursing homes like I used to visit the nursing homes, because they are the ones who we should be talking to. Because I hear people say this all the time: boy, if only I would have talked to him or her before they died. See, at that coffin, it's too late.
Yeah.
Every question you want to ask is gone.
So you would go to the nursing homes and speak to the elders there.
Mhm. I just
But
go
now
visit.
now in COVID you can't do that.
You can't do that. So
Wow.
that's been 2 years. So just imagine all of the elders who passed away within those 2 years. And
That's really sad.
each time an elder passes away, it's a library that passes away.
Mhm.
Very true. Very true. Now we have about 10 minutes to
Mhm.
go in the program. So, we definitely appreciate you. And maybe we have you back on again if you like to continue this conversation, because it's a definitely a very needed conversation. But I actually did want to ask you a question in terms of DNA. Now, there's some people that think that DNA is fake. What do you tell people that are just reluctant to take a DNA test and believe that it's false and there's nothing involved? What do you say to that?
You're always going to have people, look, let me just say this. Whenever you go for blood work, they have your DNA. If somebody want your DNA, they got it. But I know that the DNA really connected me to my family, those that I know of, and those that I was searching for. You know, I was very happy to learn more about my fourth great maternal grandfather and his brother, who had 22 children, and that still lives in that area of Shreveport and all those areas. So I am grateful for the DNA, because if it was not for the DNA, I would not have ever found them. Absolutely not. There was no way for me to make that connection. I could be standing right there looking at them in my face, and that could be relatives, and I didn't even know it. Now the DNA has helped me to connect to my family, especially on my father's side, who I knew so little about. I learned more about my dad family through DNA than I did from my dad talking to me when he was living.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned, and the reason why I asked that, because there's some people, and I'm just gonna be honest with you, that say that's white man science. Often black people don't trust the health
And we have reasons
industry.
not to.
Right.
We have reasons not to, but I know that it's been very helpful for me to reconnect to family members, because I want to pass that down to my children. I want my children to know their family, so that when they hear these surnames, they realize that this is a relative, this person is related to me in close relations, not distant relations.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely. I don't know, Kim. Should we read Dr. Harrell's bio, or should we get into the books? I think she kind of said who she was, but I think her
Well,
bio
let's
is more
take a look at
extensive.
these books. I was looking at this one called The Department of Justice, kind of stuck out to me because the Department of Justice is the agency that's responsible for, being the administrators of our reparations task force out here in California. What is your book, Department of Justice, about? I mean, what do you think
Well,
about the Department of Justice?
I spent 25 years researching involuntary servitude and modern day slavery, and I had to look into the Department of Justice files. And I was really taken by the fact that hundreds of thousands of people of African descent was held on plantations against their will. They was forced to work on these plantations as sharecroppers, many of them. And so when I started to look into these records, I started to see FBI reports, NWC reports, Attorney General files, files from complaints from private citizens that was writing to the Department of Justice, talking about the conditions in which people of African descent, Choctaw Indians, some Italians and Hungarians was living in 16 states. And I just thought that was just unbelievable until I started to do the research. And that's how this book came about. And this book is just a reprint of the letters, the complaints that I found at the National Archives in the Department of Justice files.
Wow. Oh, wow. I'll have to
Amazing,
take a
great
look
work.
at that. Yes. Now, you have been researching, modern day slavery, peonage. I've seen in your bio the 20th century. Now, we're in the 21st century now. Does it still exist on any level that you see today?
Yeah, I have been to 5 active plantations. It's a fine line. It's a very fine line. If you read any of the books that authors would write about peonage, it's a fine line. You have to be very, very, very careful. But yes, I do believe that cases of peonage still exist today, without a
And
shadow of
what
a doubt.
and what's being done to eradicate it? It looked like they're from the movie Cotton Picking Truth. It looked like they took their concerns all the way to Congress, and nothing got done.
Well, the cotton picking truth left my work, my research out of that documentary.
Mm.
And I found that was just unethical to do that. The woman May Louise Miller, Walls Miller, I introduced those producers to May. It was something I didn't agree with. They wasn't content with that, but I just believe that um, it was some injustice done there. That's one, those things happen. I'm not angry with it, but May did die. She died about 5 years ago. Um, and to be honest with you, a lot of people still didn't believe that slavery, that they was living in those conditions. Her brother's still living today, telling his story. And when we talk about reparations, why don't we interview those people who just got off plantations or just got their freedom in 1963? Those are the people who we need to be talking to. Those are the cases for reparations right there.
Okay. Do you know
Mm.
of any reparations efforts that are happening out there in Louisiana or in the southern states?
I'm not going to say there isn't, because there's in Cobra, but like I said, I've been what I call underground doing work, collecting. So I haven't been with any movement for any purpose, for that purpose. I've just been gathering documents getting the material. That's very important. Collecting the oral history from people like me, you know, and it's very time consuming, and so that's where I have been. So I haven't really been participating in a lot of conferences or meetings. That's I don't have
Sounds like
enough
you're
time.
busy doing other
I don't have
things.
enough
Yeah.
time left in my life to do that.
Speaking of being busy, it sounds like a momentous task to track down your lineage and do this genealogy work, especially from someone who's a novice and doesn't have any experience in it. Do you have any tips or tricks for like working people who are just busy and how they can fit this genealogy work into their routine?
Knowing self is the most important restoration that you can ever have. It's the most important repairing you can ever have. We never get too busy if we just dedicate 1 hour a week. We need to find that block time to say, I want to learn about me. I want to go back. It's a spiritual journey. And when you get ready to take that journey, your ancestors will be your guiding light. They will show you. But they're not going to come look for you until you're ready to meet them. I always tell people in this walk, you are ready to meet them, they will show up. And my ancestors have guided me every step of the way. I have, this is what I say to them: I am in the present. You came before me. Now I'm going to allow you to use my body to guide me to where I need to go. But I need you to show me. And every time it works, every single time. And only people who take the journey can understand it.
Okay.
Well,
And you
let's
have
take that
kids and
journey.
grandkids. Yeah, taking the journey. Your kids and grandkids, have they shown interest in keeping up the tradition and keeping
By
up
all
the
means, by all means, my coloring book, the coloring book that I created for them, it was about my grandkids. And that coloring book is about children learning their family history. I think as we sit down and gather, and I just want to say this to everyone that's listening out there, it's not just about getting together, coming together and eating and having, uh, you know, just talking and fellowshipping. There's some unfinished business that we have to take care of. Family members who have died, who purchased land, there's no reason for that land not to still be in our families. So I take my grandchildren on these journeys with me. I want them to know about themselves so that when they're in their classroom and some other little kid can say, I can go back 5 or 6 generations, my grandkids can say, I can go back 8 generations, because it's a household conversation. We pull the photographs out. I use my ancestors as the characters in the coloring books that I created for my grandkids. And that means that every child can answer, what is my mother's maiden name? That's very important. What is my grandfather's name? What is my mother's name? Those are very important things. We are losing land. Let me just say this here. In 1900, we owned 15.5 million acres of land. Today in 2021, we're less than 1.2 million acres. We're not opening up successions when people die. We're not taking care of the cemeteries like we used to do. It's some things that we got to go back and reclaim because we're giving the land back now.
right.
We're
There are
giving the
things we
land.
need to do, and we're gonna offline about that. But yeah, I mean, even with some of these, I also heard you, you were on another YouTube show and you were talking about how you've connected with your family and helping you do this genealogy work, and you guys meet every a week or so to talk about it
Mhm.
and pull it up. So my family, these 80 family members that I discovered during this last land track, a few of us have gotten together. Now we get together every other week and just talk about, the land and how much land we had versus how much land we have now. But like I said, even through these, what they call them is like servitude lease agreements. And if you don't read the fine print, you're basically signing it away because it's like, we can extend this for perpetuity forever.
Yeah. And we see it happening every day. And let me say this, because of the global warming, and we're looking at here in Louisiana where we're losing the wetlands. And so the floodings are happening more and more in places where it never flood. People are going to be looking for land. And so we have the land. And I just want to remind everybody that when our ancestors was working out there from sun up to sundown and paying that 50 cent an acre, but it was a hard 50 cent an acre. They couldn't read, they couldn't write, but they had us in mind. Now, many of us have college degrees, we can read, we can write, and we have less than our ancestors had, and they couldn't do the things that we did. So they had wisdom, mother wisdom. You see, it's something wrong with that picture, and we have to be honest and say, wait a minute, if grandfather bought 200 acres of land in 1888, and we're just letting it go. Why? But that same family member who will hold on to it will not turn it over to somebody in the family. You see, those are the kind of conversations. If you don't want anything to do with it, why don't you go ahead and do it legally and relinquish all of your rights to it if you don't want anything to do with it? And every family is facing that same dilemma. Every family.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just don't realize until, it's like you said, the elders are gone and there's nobody to really explain it to you and help you navigate, through this new terrain that you're dealing with. Because, like I said, out here in California, we don't know nothing about the land out there, but it's time to take a trip.
That's right. That's right. My cousins didn't know anything about the land in Milwaukee, but we organized a Zoom meeting. I had the legal description of the land, whose name the land was in, when was the last time someone did something on the land, how many successions was open, and how many successions we need to open. You see, and they was grateful that I did that. Now, some of the family members wasn't too happy with that, but heir is an heir, you know, bottom line.
Bottom line.
We bought nothing in this world and we're going to take nothing out with us. But be a good steward over when it come your turn, do what you need to do. Take care of your business.
Definitely.
Mhm.
Take care of the business. I like that one. Well, Dr. Harrell, we definitely appreciate your time. And we love to have you back on the platform again and actually go dig a little deeper next time actually into your works, because I really want to extract, more of your story and more of your work. Now, family, let's see. Let's post it one more time onto the, let's see if we can get it here. Okay, so yeah, Dr. Harrell, are most of your books on Amazon? Can they
Yes.
find
Hmm.
books there? Okay. So yeah, go ahead, support Dr. Harrell family. Let's go get these books. Let's do our research. Sure, there's some valuable information in those works that Dr. Harrell has spent her life on uh, to give to the Black community in specifically, and also the world in general. So definitely, family. I think we're gonna wrap it up. Is there anything else, Dr. Varela, you would like to tell the audience, people listening, before we get out of here?
Yes, it's never too late to start researching and learn about your family history. And I want to thank both of you for having me as a guest. And also, if I come back on your show, do you have the capabilities of showing documents on this platform here?
Yes, we do. We can either we can probably table this offline, but yes, we do. We'll just say
Okay.
yes, we do.
Because I always like to educate with documents so that everybody can understand what those documents would look like and what those documents are all about.
Yeah, that'd be a wonderful teaching moment.
Yeah.
Yes. All
Yeah.
right.
And
Well,
I will see you next time. And
all
thank you
right.
so much for joining us.
Thank you all. All right. And have a great one.
You too.
All right.
Okay.
You
Bye
too
bye.
now.
Uh-huh.
Bye bye.